All right, how's everyone doing? Good. So today is September 21st. It's the Waunakee Community School District Board of Education Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Call to order. First thing I'm going to do is roll call. So when you hear your name, please say here or I. All right, so Michelle Bird, I'm assuming she didn't get on yet. Dave Boucher. Here. Mike Brandt.
There he is.
Oh, okay. Michelle's here. Audrey Deppen. Sam Kaufman. Here. Joel Lewis here. Melanie Meister.
Here.
Monique Mobley. Isabella Moore.
Here.
Laura Ostrander.
Here.
Regina Pagel.
Here.
Leslie Petty.
Here.
Mike Pisani. Bethany Pottinger.
Here.
Tim Shell.
Here.
Christina Shuppleman.
Here.
Diana Trice Rusk.
Here.
And Nia Bang. Okay, is there anybody's name I did not call? Okay, so next thing is approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. So I'm assuming everyone sees the agenda. Motion for the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Here a second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, is there any public comments? Okay, so there's no public comments at this time. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do on the agenda is a shared language glossary of terms. So who worked on that? Okay,
So, yeah,
you guys wanna take it away.
So, okay, all right. So, first I want to say thank you to my two fellow colleagues, DEI colleagues, Bethany and Laura. We started working on this project back in August. And what we decided to do was, we were a bit strategic with this initiative. What we decided to do was, let's take a look at commonly used terms. Commonly used terms in a way that that we knew that students, instructors, educators, let's just say educators, could, if you will, relate and or have heard of these terms before, or had some way or another felt that is relevant. So we looked at a pretty long list of terms. We decided to have, if you will, the initial phase of terms. So the terms that you see in front of you is an initial sort of draft that we would like for the committee to take a look at, ask questions, and perhaps,
Do you have it on computer?
do we have it?
It is in the drive, and I just emailed it to you for easy access.
We want this to be a work in progress. There's more, there's a longer list in which we did not bring those terms in front of you. And the reason why is that we want to be sensitive to sort of the, what is it that I want to say? Sensitive to the landscape in which the environment that we're in now. We didn't want to have trigger words, if you will. Not to say that these words are not as important, these terms are not as important as the ones that we're presenting today, because we do feel that as this is a work in progress, it will continue to evolve. That being said, though, you know, terms will continue to be added to this list. So this is an initial list that we want to present to the committee, present in a way that we want to open it up for dialogue and discussion. Bethany and Laura, any thoughts?
Great. So at this point, we just have a list of words And definitions that we found in various sources, and we cited the sources when there was a clear, like place that we got it. And then there were other times where we kind of came up with definitions on our own. So that's why sometimes there are things in parentheses at the end.
The one piece I'll add is, as you're creating this, it right now kind of looks like a glossary of random words in no particular order. And as we're thinking about the purpose of this tool, one is to have that common language piece, but it's also to think about communicating that in the best possible format. And so as we look at these words, one, are these kind of the words that capture a base foundation for our work in equity that represents what we could be talking about at the school level and helping community and families understand that same language? And two, what is the best way to bring this language forth to all the stakeholders over time? That's not necessarily a glossary, but how do you paint that picture for people to take them on the journey with us?
Now, there also may be terms in which you don't see on this list that you think that is important for us to add. And so that we want to, at this point, ensure that the committee drives this project and that it's not driven by three committee members.
So I see with majority, there's no definition for majority?
That was a conversation we were having. We were wondering if possibly minority was defined, but majority wasn't. And then majority is hard to find a definition for, interestingly, without it being tied directly to minority. So we were wondering if maybe that's a paired definition with majority minority. That was kind of the end of our last conversation, and we just decided we don't have to, come to a concrete thing. We could throw it out to you guys to see if you wanted to weigh in on that one. Definitely, we're open for that, as this is an evolving list of what is important to define.
I think me personally, I like that minority and majority go together, because majority could be, it could look different, right? We don't want to automatically assume that majority is one thing. And I think if you separate it, it's kind of going to be like, well, we're talking about, and typically when we say majority, we're talking about white people, right? So clearly we don't want to make this as a divisive thing. When someone just sees it automatically, they just go right there. But understanding that the majority is the people in power, the people making decisions.
And so I will argue that point, that majority isn't always sort of the dominant white population. Majority might be in a situation where you will have a room full of people of color, and then you have that majority, they are then known as the majority. And that, so I also think that when we look at this list, we also want to think about within the respective context that we bring this in, and not to sort of have our own assumptions and bias that's brought into this. And that's why we were very careful with the list that we came up with as an introductory list, and something that we often, as educators, see in our daily lives.
One question that I'll pose to the group, after looking over this document, it is very racially centered. And if we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not, I think our mind goes to race, because that's an easy thing to name, and also it's very much discussed or talked about, recognized. But again, if we're creating a vocabulary for understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion across different areas, it's really not about race. And then, so how do we then need to expand this further?
Yeah, that is just what I was thinking, that I think
as a society, we go there, not just the
Correct.
three of you.
Exactly.
And so I think one of the things that is a goal of the upcoming event in the district is to expand people's understanding of what all of this refers to. And so I agree that it would be important to add additional terminology that is outside of that context. And I would encourage thinking about the language that was in that school board statement. Because even in writing that, the subcommittee was really thoughtful about, you know, often we hear disability referred to, and if we pose the language differently abled, and, you know, put in context that, you know, often the focus is on disability, that will set an important tone. And then in reference to the conversation about minority and majority, I think that's an important, I think you guys are onto something important there as well, and that it's situational, right? Often recently I've heard the term global majority to refer to what our society often considers minority groups, people of color. So I would agree with Joel's sentiment that maybe putting those two together and defining it as kind of based in context would be important.
So one observation I have regarding the minority majority is minority, sometimes there's an action. You know, I know sometimes minoritized is used as the term, but if using minority, there's something about me that there's an action somewhere in that statement, that groups are subordinated by someone or something, by the dominant. So there's something about, because it's one thing to be a minority of a certain representation in a group, it's something different to be minoritized. And I feel like that is what the definition is getting at, is that subordinate. The power group is subordinating the lower group. And then on the other side of that with majority, I think there's a lot of situations where one group might be the majority, but yet they're still minoritized because the values or the beliefs or because of race, that the values are minoritized and the identity is minoritized. So I know it's sort of sticky and
No,
maybe you can get a little.
I think that your point is well taken. I definitely agree with that. And because even though it is situational, I also think that because of how systemic policies and systems are in our society, it's still that majority minority still holds a very dominant image.
I think that's also another word I've been hearing a lot, systemic. People question that, not understanding what systemic is, or how is it possible. So maybe that's something to add on our list as well.
I'll offer that as we are thinking through phases, what we were kind of thinking was a base, like a foundational phase one that were less risky terms. And then as that we lay that foundation of those less risky terms or whatever terms, sorry. Then after that, you add in another layer of those things. You talk about white privilege, right? You talk about anything that holds that power element to it. Because what we didn't want to do was come out of the gates and be like, bang, it's systemic, whatever, you know, because there, you know, these are all terms that we're all learning, and like when we start learning, it's at the softer place. And then you bring in like the other terms, and systemic, where does that fall? And that's kind of, this is our beginning phase. And then we had all these other words that kind of like, they're important. And then at what point do we hit them? And I guess for me, you know, as we create this glossary, because it helps us come up with connected ideas, what is our hope for this and bringing it alive as we move forward? Because a list of words is a list of words. but it has the power to do many things, but how we use it matters. And so if we're gonna continue thinking about refining this, what's the end goal? As we think about it.
Well, common language, right? So people people understand what we're saying, when we're having meetings, or trying to present something, they're understanding it. So I guess I feel like that common language, maybe learning something that they did not know. So, I mean, for me, that's what it would be more common language that we should be using.
And so adding to that question, common language, here's a glossary of terms that we think of, and or are we facilitating it in a way where we're slowly bringing it to the table? And how might that look? That doesn't have to be answered now. That's just sort of rhetorical thinking about how do you bring it alive?
But, I'm kind of fixated on the term multicultural and like listening to your conversation, what we're thinking about that. I think especially just with the school perspective, not even moving out into the community, but I think it's true there too. We say we're multicultural, but this says here, which I thought was interesting, does not necessarily have engaging interactions with others. That's the part that really strikes with me. I think as kids are younger, moving up through the grades, I'm primarily at the high school, you start to see this disengagement between groups, whether it's socioeconomic, country you're from, language, skin color. We're not, it just happens. And I see that, and that's the term that kind of really sticks with me, that the engagement between the groups somehow seems to fall apart, and I'm not exactly sure why. And it doesn't happen across everything, but I see that a lot. You don't see kids mixing together unless it's for a very specific thing. They're very group focused, and their group tends to be homogeneous.
Yeah.
With a few people here and there, but not as a majority or a strongly engaged part of the group.
So I see on the bottom, it says interracial, like when I think interracial, I think of couples, right? So I think about kids, I think about biracial, my own kids. So biracial, people understanding what that means. How can we identify?
Recent grants, do you have any thoughts? From like a secondary student kind of perspective of things that we're missing, or?
I think this is like a solid list. I just was wondering too, if like, would this just stay with this committee, or would like it branch off for like the whole village to like read it? So I feel like just like posting this on like Waunakee talk or like want to talk about diversity would be like so informative and just so helpful for like just people understanding these terms, not just like with us, but like the whole village. I was just wondering that, but I think it's a solid list of terms so far.
Yeah,
And I think the committee website would be another good place to.
yeah, that was a question we had for the group. Like one of the audiences that we had in mind as we were making this list was the linkage meeting that's going on later this month with the community. Yeah. But then we were wondering, like, do we want to put this into like a PowerPoint type of format? Do we want to have it be like a website? Like, what would be a good format for us to share this with the larger community? So that, you know, we have that transparency about when we as a committee are talking about things, this is what we mean. And then also, like you said, it's informative, and we want people to be informed.
I think like this doc would like work well, or maybe like a presentation and have like each slide either have like a picture, because a lot of people like understand pictures a lot better, and like maybe like have a link towards a video towards like the subject or something like that. But I think like just like getting this out to like the general public, like that would just work well. Like maybe work your way up to like, or work our way up to a PowerPoint.
If there's any creative minds, so we made a list, and then I kept trying to think, this mind mapping exercise about how do things sort of intersect and build off of each other. So if we had any way to sort of connect ideas together, so it isn't a separate list of terms, but really they live together in some fashion, what terms connect within a bubble. I think people have more creative minds than I might. So if you are interested in maybe talking about how to create a visual or a graphic or a map that would be easier to see and interpret, so that it's all connected, I'd be open to exploring that.
I would like to add that I spoke with Randy to confirm some questions I had about the upcoming community engagement event on Monday. And he is planning to print the recommendations to have as a handout. And he will be presenting at the beginning, and that is meant to just be a short part of that meeting. So he's not looking for any of us to share anything there unless it's in response to a question. But what I'm wondering is if something like this could be added on, because that document is heavy on this type of terminology. And it may be helpful to serve as kind of a glossary for what our recommendations are all about. I think we would, if we did want to have that ready for Monday, we would need to go through the recommendations with this next to it and kind of think about what words in there might be helpful as a starting point. I don't know. That's just a way to kind of connect some things that you were saying.
Just to clarify, so he's not presenting again.
He's
It's
not
something
presenting the
totally-
recommendations,
Okay, so that's,
No.
so he's presenting on something else.
just the
But also
district's
including
general
that.
work in this area. Yeah.
And so paraphrasing, what I heard you say is maybe looking at the recommendations, finding the common language, creating a glossary, the common language to be attached, perhaps those recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, I think these words are very necessary, but perhaps there's others that fit into those other areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, such as ability and gender and things like that, that might be added. And if we're unsure about this, how to, manage the minority majority thing at this time, we could, include that in that next round or whatever as well.
I think because of like all the tension going on, I think don't have race like the first word within the definition. Put it in the middle of the definition, so there's another word that replaces that, because unfortunately, people are just going to be fixated on mind, so just change it so they're listening to the whole definition, not just part of it.
Well, I appreciate how you did start with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that was a powerful entrance to it.
Yeah, and they're not in any specific order. Those three were started for a reason, but I love your idea of using the words from the recommendation, because it broadens then this away from race, because it's not just race. I think that was just the lens we took. But that gives us the language and helps us take down the more race heavy language that we can kind of continue. Maybe there's more than two phases also. Okay, great. Yeah,
job.
thank you guys for your feedback.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback.
It's a journey for sure.
Yeah, fantastic.
Can I just make one more?
Yeah.
The identity, the definition of identity.
Uh-huh.
I'm struggling with that just a little bit. So an identity can be given. And that's what this definition feels a little bit more like, is an identity that's given to an individual. And when I think of an identity, I think of something that is self-formed, and it's about distinguishing characteristics that the individual recognizes and integrates for themselves across their lifespan. And I was playing with words and I haven't really found the perfect way to really articulate it, but there's something about self that I feel is really important if the meaning of that definition is supposed to be how I see my identity or how another individual sees their identity. I think there needs to be a self-recognition. So I kind of played with distinguishing characteristics recognized by an individual about themselves through their lived experiences across their lifespan.
Would that then be self-identity? I think for me, when it was the original way, I could have read it both ways. It could have been how I identify myself or the identity people place on me. Yeah, I didn't even think of it till you brought it up. But I'm open to whatever, but that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
I mean, that's kind of an important, huge conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where we fall.
Maybe
into
we have two definitions
misunderstandings and
of
fall
identity.
into discriminatory patterns is when we identify someone.
Correct?
Can I throw out one more thought too? There seem to have been a lot of people discussing the use of the word race when we talk about the book study of the white racial frame. And when I look at this definition of race, it does follow a lot of what the author of the book was talking about. And through the historical perspective that he offered, he showed how these things played out about physical differences and intellectual, moral, and cultural superiority. I'm not saying I disagree with this definition of race, but I feel like people might just focus on that one term out of this long list. And that was something that seemed to have really sparked a lot of discussion and a lot of anger. And I just don't know what the right definition of race is, but this definition is a fair definition, but it also could be a little bit charged. And I'm not quite sure, given we already know the reaction from the book discussion that was community-wide. Do we want to throw ourselves into that ring again?
The problem is that, like, this is not supposed to look nice, right? Because this, to me, this is phase one. If you think about phase two and you start getting into it more, it's going to just say push people's buttons, make people feel uncomfortable. So I do hear what you're saying, but I feel like we got to be careful about, because even me saying, well, let's move race out of the first, like, I would normally not do that, but I'm just trying to think, we're trying to be a community, we're trying to get people to come along. We do have to kind of like figure it out so people don't just get reactive, but at the same time, we have to do what we need to do in terms of presenting what we have to present, because that is the reality, even if people don't agree.
Well, the word, I mean, just as Laura had indicated earlier, this is sort of a foundational list. Now, if you want us to remove the word race and the definition, then we might as well start scrapping diversity, equity, and inclusion and intersection. We might as well start scrapping it all. I got to be honest. I think that this is a great introductory. I also think that for a small minority of individuals who may have an issue with this, we will address it. I think we definitely we have language around how to address it, but I think this is part of the fundamental terms when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I agree. I have to say everything, I mean, that's, our whole committee is gonna be divisive and controversial. I mean, that's what we do. Nothing we do will be like taken with ease. And I think defining the word race is part of that, right? I don't think that we can ever put it there where somebody's not gonna be happy, everyone's gonna be happy. And I'm okay with that. I think that's why we're all here at the table. This isn't an easy job, you know what I mean? And we do it voluntarily because, and it's always not, it's never gonna be easy. So I love this start. I think it's great. It helps me understand, puts a baseline for where I need to be. And so I really appreciate that. My brain is like super just like simple sometimes when it comes to like majority, minority. I literally think my majority more than 50%, less than 50%, but I know that probably won't ride well sit well with people. Otherwise, I would say for a majority, I would say a dominant group and the minority, a subcategory of the dominant group. But in my mind, that's like really broad and encompasses this whole like dominance over, but you know, it's a larger group. But I also like these two. I have nothing against it. I just don't like that.
It sounds like the common terms that I think we find pause on have the idea of superiority involved. And so when we look at the race definition, we could almost keep that definition, but think of a different superiority. Now, we can lean in and take some risk, right? If we can say, yes, race has some risk, majority has some risk, the majority of the document itself is neutral, we could lean in and go with it. If we were wanting to soften it further, we could play with the word superiority and leave this definition of race standing. If we wanted to do the same thing with majority and minority, we can soften that language. It's not going to make or break it, knowing that it's really the dialogue around the table that we're hoping to get, so that
Exactly.
people are willing to come to the table again and again.
Because a lot of the time that we've spent on this project has really been sort of refining the language to the definition.
Yes.
So in a way that it does not compromise the integrity of the definition of the word, but in a way that, you know, that it still speak the truth of what it is. So we've kind of made our own edits along the way, even though we have credited authors on here or sites on here. So we can definitely revisit the word superiority.
I think an important part about the definitions, though, is that they're the definitions. They're not the argument or the discussion.
Right.
And in that sense, when I look at the word race, most of us understand that it was a socially constructed
It is.
phenomenon.
That's right.
But to sit there and then add in things that it is related to intellectual, moral, cultural superiority, we understand that some people have used it that way. But that's not the definition of the word. The definition of the word is the social construct. The action that is applied to the use of that word is something outside the definition. And I think if we want to be as inclusive as possible and trying to get people into this discussion, it's about, let's just give them the definition. We'll get into the use of that definition later and then how it's applied. Multicultural is a bit of the same. I'm not sure why that example is there. I understand it happens. I just don't think it's part of the definition. It's more of an action that happens outside of the definition.
I would agree that would give us space to add some more words to
Yeah.
without it getting
Right.
too lengthy.
Yeah, we certainly.
We don't get into, you're almost getting into discussion while just trying to provide the definition.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful because the reason that came in was because we had multicultural versus intercultural
Yeah, we did.
versus a third one that I
We had
can't remember right now.
intercultural, right.
Cross-cultural.
We really got nerdy
Yeah,
with
we
this.
really got.
And
And it scaled it right up.
Which is the fun of being.
We
a
had like
teacher.
3 pages. We were all over the place. And I
Yeah.
think we just kind of smacked an example and was like, yeah, that's right, we got this.
Yeah,
We
I
did
think
this. Yeah.
the example made sense when
the
it
time,
was compared to the other two words.
Exactly.
Meaning that multicultural is kind of the beginning, but there's a richer way of being. But I think you're right that now that we took those other words out, that example no longer gives the context. So yeah, I think that we can definitely take that out and maybe like rework that definition so that it's not like this in comparison to these two other things that are no longer in the
Yes.
list. So,
But when I was looking at minority and majority though, I thought some of the comments people were making is that this isn't just, and you have the word social in there or social subdivision, but economic is also a large one that I think when you get to minority and majority, it's not always the number. It's more the position of power and influence versus subjugation. And in that sense, I'm thinking that maybe the definition could more state that economic or social subdivisions were subordinate to a dominant group. And then in majority, all you got to say is the group that is dominant in the sphere you are looking at. In other words, if it's economic, a few billionaires are gonna be dominant compared
Right.
to hundreds of millions of lower class people, lower economic.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's in the spirit of what we were looking at, but we just wanted to bring it back to the
Yeah.
committee, just to get some feedback. Some idea. So going back up to the word race. Okay, in this definition. A socially constructed phenomenon based on the assumptions that physical differences such as skin color, hair color, texture, and facial or other physical features. Do you want to stop there? Do you suggest I stop there and take out are related to intellectual, moral, and cultural superiority?
I would say are related to group characteristics. In other words, just by taking someone's skin color, somehow they become a group of like.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
categorizing them just because of their skin color. Or maybe the simplest way is not to say are related, is to say features that cause a social group or something like that.
I also wonder if, I mean,
No.
the race wasn't created in a generally applicable like purpose, right? It was created for the purpose of power. So I think if race is not a scientifically based thing, and it is a human created concept, to take out the idea of power feels strange to me because it is so tied. I don't know what to do with the definition based on that, but it does feel hollow if you just say that it is grouping based on these characteristics, because that's not.
That is the truth, though.
But that's
That
if
is
we
definitely the
ascribe
truth.
to a certain way of thinking. Because if you don't have a background in thinking of race, I see race in it like with less of a background as different skin colors or different, physical features. And I, in my brain, never would have assigned it to anything like personally that was moral or intellectual. Now that I look back, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to say that. I had to be educated to learn that that might have been living in my mind before I realized it might be living in my mind.
I mean, I think, in the span of human history, race is a pretty decent arrival in how humans sometimes think about each other.
Mhm.
And it's something that has become reinforced. I mean, how often are we asked to fill out some official form and sometimes it's a required element. And if we don't fill it out, then some official's obligated where we have to put ourselves into a bucket. It's really an artificial bucket. We'll be put in a bucket that could describe a quarter of humanity, and that's,
This is
but to that point, I guess it's worth us getting solid on this because we can come back to this down the road. But if we print off copies of this
Right.
for Monday night,
Yes,
that paper copy is going to become a sticky definition.
Yes.
It's going to be persistent.
Correct.
So, I know it's redundant, but it might help communicate if based on the assumption or belief that physical characteristics, And then I don't know if we want to talk about group characteristics, or I think the language as presented is also fun.
Well, I think race is different too, because I think about our first son, when I was in the hospital, and you have to fill out the form. So my wife is white, and they actually went with her race versus mine. We couldn't check both.
Huh.
And, I wasn't too happy with that. Not saying I'm not happy with my wife, but like how we determine that, right? So I guess depending on where we're coming from and our experiences, help determine that definition.
See, this is where we're getting beyond a definition and getting into a discussion of the impact of the word. And that's where I guess the pure philosophy major in me says the definition has to be without argument. It has to be a definition of something that doesn't involve the argument you're trying to make of how to deal with it. And when I look at race, we all agree it's a socially constructed phenomenon. We know that based on physical differences such as those things or features.
Period.
Now, when Tim, you brought up that this is a more recent creation, I would actually historically disagree with you. I mean, you have racial definitions back in the initial colonization of America. You have racial
for me,
definitions
that
that
is
were used.
As someone in history, that's
As-
recent.
That is
Yeah,
recent.
but you could go all the way back to BC and find racial definitions that were used to create groups, whether it was the Romans or whether it was the Egyptians or whether, Egyptians versus the Jewish society. They were running a racial definition there that created divisions. And I mean, that goes back thousands of years. So when you say recent, yes, some of the racial definitions are recent, but there's always been racial definitions, I think, pretty far back of almost any recorded history. You can find them. So I'm trying to find a way that we can begin the discussion with the community as a whole without automatically allowing someone to come in and say, you started out with a flawed definition,
Yes.
and they sit there and attack us
Can
and
we-
attack the idea.
Now let's-
Can I just put some wording out, say, okay, so we go, a social constructed phenomenon based on the assumption of belief that physical differences such as skin color, hair color, and texture, and facial and or other physical features are something other than what it is, right? That's really broad, but it really is, that's what it is, right? You just look at somebody's hair and you assume something other than it is. We don't have to discuss it, but what we're really saying is, when we look in America, when we look at race, when we talk about race, that's what we're doing, right? We look at Joel, and we look at his skin color, and then we assume something other than just Joel, right? He's a black man. We associate that. So we don't have to define it, but could we agree on that, something broad like that? Because it kind of points to that, but it doesn't, I guess it really softens. No, I'm not about softening. I'm all about like, this is great, but if we need to, I would just, that's how I would soften it, maybe.
I think there's a connector that's needed, because there's a jump. And the word to me, first of all, assumptions is really important and critical to the definition, because those are assumptions. So facial or physical features used to categorize individuals. And then I'm not sure of the words, and it's once the individuals are categorized, then that's where to me, that's what gets related to subordination, cultural superiority.
Yeah, I like that. How about we use that, just, it's used together, and we can leave it as that, and people can open up the discussion.
I mean, what does Webster say? So we type it in.
It clearly wasn't as good as this one because we didn't pick it.
I was just looking that sort of thing up.
We looked at many definitions.
Sure did.
It's very broad and simple, because they don't want to touch it. Yeah, nobody wants to touch it. I looked at it, I'm like, okay.
They actually had a good one on here, of race versus ethnicity, where it says, a race is a grouping of humans based on shared physical or social qualities into categories generally viewed as distinct by society.
Huh? Is
Such
that
that,
Webster?
no, it wasn't Webster directly.
It's not Urban Dictionary.
That was-
No, no,
So I do like categorization.
it was in an article comparing race versus ethnicity.
I think the word categorized here, and then we could perhaps, we can even put the other item just as a note. I don't want to, but we could just keep it simple and just.
Categorize
Would it
people.
be fair to say
Oh.
the assumption is that these features can be used to categorize people?
A socially
I think
constructed
that's- yeah.
phenomenon in which we categorize people based on physical differences such as blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
to make assumptions. Something where we're flipping that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think this is good.
Mhm.
This looks good.
Right.
Did you get that
I
back?
like this.
There we go.
rather than-
That's the PPO
Okay.
definition.
Take this out.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Good.
All right.
Oh,
All
okay.
right,
I see
so,
that.
so back to this, are we bringing this in on Monday, or are we just kind of not doing that? I mean, are we?
I don't know, it
agreeing-
was just a question.
No, and that's to the group, like, what do you?
It seems like a rush from my.
I,
perspective.
yeah, because I'm starting to think, I think we need time. We need time to go back and
Yep.
talk about like the deliverables.
Mhm.
And for us to have something in place on Monday, I know I wouldn't be able to fit anything like that in my schedule. You know, Bethany and Laura might be able to make that happen.
I think we want it well done.
I think so too.
I would agree. The only reason I brought it up is that document is going to be printed off. And there's a lot of technical language in it.
Can you
So
put a
then at
copy
that
on?
point, we can say later on, in order to clarify questions about the recommendations, we have now put this together, and then we'll just have to try to find a way to reach all the people who were there. so
Well,
that
and
they-
I think, you know, the reality is we're inside of a week. And, you know, the report is public, that's official.
Right.
This isn't finalized yet.
Yep.
And if we were, even if we were to put draft on it, if it were to come in, we were to print it and have it available along with that report, and 100 copies went out, that would be a very high profile
Yep.
draft, and that would stick in a lot of people's memory.
That's right.
And it's
Yeah.
been interesting to me over the last several months that there are conversations about what I see as really substantive concepts. And then sometimes there are conversations that have much more life than I would have expected, just around terminology.
Mhm.
And is this a code for something else? And so, you know, if we could lock it down tonight, I would say great, but based on the conversation we've had, I don't think we're quite there. I think our writing team's doing great work, and let's give them more time to kind of take this discussion back. And let's not rush putting this out into wider distribution, and maybe
Yeah.
having something that we'll come back to and want to revise later.
I agree.
I agree with that.
If anybody wants to add comments to this, you can like add comments to the document, or email one of us, I guess, if you're not sure how to do that. Because I think that, you know, when you start talking about this stuff for as long as we were talking about it, you start to, you know, like words start to lose their meaning. So, feel free to, you know, inject your wisdom into it.
I don't have a lot of, I mean, I have to say, I'm very impressed by the work the three of you did. You know, and I think we owe you gratitude as a committee for the time you put into this. But
Well,
being
thank
so close, I think it would be a mistake to kind
Oh,
of rush it
yeah.
over the
Yeah,
last.
yeah, just think about the dialogue today and how, for us to kind of push this on for a Monday evening. I don't think we wouldn't be there. I think we need time.
Well, and I think that, you know, as we look at this long term, this is evolving. It's
Exactly.
new conversation to schools and communities, and this is the very beginning of that journey. And so I'd rather do it well and slowly and thoughtfully than just have something out there until it's ready.
Yeah.
And there's no need for it to be ready on day one of putting it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work.
All right, let's move on to the next. So review, discuss the delivery results of the report to the Board of Education on 9/13/21. Thank you.
Oh, this is.
Well, I-
Not just you, I just
I-
mean.
I- I would like-
I
I would
know,
like
that's
to
what I
start by
said.
saying I was very, you know, I think, you know, our materials are very good, but I really want to say to Joel and Gina, thank you for doing such an outstanding job of presenting this.
So I'll let you go first, Gina. Just because the next part of our agenda too kind of meshes with it as well. So let's just kind of talk about the, in terms of presenting and how you think that went.
Sure. I think that it was very helpful to have the written work. So thanks again to the team that was working on that, to use as a basis for our slides. And I think it's helpful for board members to go back and spend more time with those documents as they're going forward. So I was pleased with that. I think that overall people were engaging with what we had given them in advance while we were presenting. And then the questions that followed prompted some good discussion about barriers that may be in the way of some of our students and bringing some specificity to that, because we hadn't really gotten to that in the presentation. And then there were also some questions about, just disagreement perhaps about the specific recommendations, and yet agreement on all of the overarching ideas. And so I was glad to see in the end that we're not disagreeing so far on the big picture. And so in one of my responses, I noted that we don't have time to agree on everything. We really need to start with what we can agree on. And yes, work to continue understanding each other's perspectives as we move forward. But I was pleased with how that was able to come up based on some questions that we had. So I haven't gotten any further questions about the specifics, and I would be curious to see what the process looks like at the board level about moving forward. The discussion at the end was simply, we're not going to make any movement first until we have the full board present, because 2 people were missing. And then until after this Monday's coming event to hear some community feedback as well.
So my take on it, the work it was awesome in terms of time put into that, so we were able to present it. What I have to say is totally opposite. The first time, we were at the end of the meeting. I think it was 3
After
hours.
9:30.
It was crazy. But before that
Yes.
was very
Okay, I was just talking about the presentation.
Yeah, no, but yeah.
But thank you for sharing.
But we're setting the stage of what Gina and I had to do at the end of a presentation. And then with all of that toxicity, which I was not even expecting that. I did not know we were walking into that. That's the first time I've ever seen that. And it really upset me. My wife was there as well, and she saw it, but she was on the other side. And I was really disappointed to realize that we have some of this messaging going out into the community like this. And I think to myself, I'm an adult and I can handle things better, but what about our kids, right? What happened if similar things, just say bullying, name calling, those things are happening daily, and then nobody's doing anything or they don't know what to do. I feel like, if the main goal is the kids, right? And making sure that every child gets what they need regardless. And I don't feel like, and I'm not talking about this group, that everybody there cares about them. They might not say that, but it's projected that way. And I think it's hard for me because when we have conversations like this, I understand we have to go slow. I understand we have to keep it soft. But the thing is that when do we address those things? We can't keep skirting around a lot of things because sometimes we just got to go ahead first and kind of deal with it, right? But that's where I feel like that didn't happen that night. Honestly, to tell you the truth, if that was my first reception in Waunakee, I wouldn't live here. I also want you to understand, I was the only Black male that was sitting in that. If I wasn't so secure in myself, right? I could have had other thoughts, right? I mean, it was, for the people who were there, they saw it. And it was just like, it was not good. So I think what I'm asking us to do is we just have to figure out, how do we continue to move forward, even though there's going to be division? We know that people are not going to be happy with things that we say what we're doing. You know, this whole week and weekend, people have been reaching out in support because they heard what happened in that board meeting. And the thing is that we should not allow that as a community. We should not at all. Imagine if our kids, I'm so glad that those kids, students who presented were not there, or we weren't earlier, because imagine if they heard or were exposed to that stuff. Like, it was just disgusting and very hurtful.
I strongly agree with what you're saying, Joel, and I think that the board and the leadership at the board has got to do a better job of regulating when people are speaking. It's a public forum, that there should not be outbursts, there should not be clapping, there should not be jeering going on, and I didn't really see any rules of order that were ever put in. It was incumbent on the person who was speaking to say, please stop. There was no leadership from the front that said, please let the speaker be. And I am very concerned at what will happen in the PAC when you have several hundred people who are planned and organized in whatever ways. Who is going to keep order in that meeting? Because I feel that everyone has an equal voice, but somebody will need to be a master of order in there so that we don't have anarchy that breaks out on either side.
I mean, I totally agree with that. Like when we had the first community meeting, it was so great that Sheriff Mahoney was there. Just because, you know, I know he retired, but at least if something happened, people would think twice about that. And I do have to say, if there's more, and you know, people are going to be organized and they're going to come out there, you know, people are going to now, and I don't know if this is true, but I guess we got an email saying that you have to submit your questions.
So there will be
No.
questions from the floor as well. I asked Randy and the engagement specialist to clarify that in a further email.
Oh, okay.
So their request is that if you have questions in advance and you share them in advance, then Randy can tie in some general questions to his presentation. There will still be questions from the floor, and there will also be the opportunity, because Zoom wouldn't work out, it would be through watching it on YouTube, and people will have an email address to be able to email if they're watching it, not in the PAC, to ask questions during the.
But who will moderate it?
So Randy will
So
be
I would
moderating.
like to build on this a little bit.
Thank you.
You know, so first, the point of the questions is we acknowledge that not everybody due to scheduling or comfort in large gatherings may wish to actually be in the PAC in person. So that's a supplement to the live. We anticipate that we have had some submissions already, but I think we will see more questions live because it's a meeting of the board. Unlike the one in July, there will be no anonymous submissions. You have to identify yourself when you're speaking. So the question is going to be placed in the public setting. The person has to identify themselves in submission. You know, I think, you know, the tenor of the comments, you know, last Monday night, you know, was extremely unfortunate, and we really don't have, in my memory, any precedent for that since at least I came here in 1999. Having seen, you know, what transpired Monday night, we are going to, at the beginning of the meeting, we have some ground rules for the evening that we might see in some meetings, but we have reviewed those, trying to take some observations from the other night. As Gina was saying, Randy's going to be moderating, we have had the discussion, should we have a third party moderator? The notice is fairly short. We feel the superintendent moderating the meeting should be authority enough. And we feel both with the time, and we don't know if there's necessarily the benefit for wanting to bring in a third party specifically to get kind of brought in into what is really intended to be a presentation to summarize what the work currently looks like in the district, and then hear feedback from the community. It's a more structured situation. It's not a public comment section. I mean, there are going to be public comments, but it is a structured evening. So that's the thinking behind it. We certainly anticipate and hope that we would see the civility in which this community normally conducts itself, the standard our community normally and historically has held itself to. And we hope that that's the tenor that prevails on the concept.
Can I add on? So part of me, what I hear is there's a little bit of fear and disappointment in what may have occurred at the last meeting. I wasn't at the meeting. I ended up going to Lodi because we were going through a similar conversation, and we had the large auditorium meeting. And it was structured very similarly, and people got up and spoke their piece, and it was well moderated. I think for me, what my hope as we go into this work, it's new territory, is people need a venue not to do public commenting so that they can be heard or be a voice to be heard, but that people can engage in ongoing dialogue to hear one another. That requires commitment, that requires time, that requires planning, and a commitment as a community and a school to work together in partnership to come to an end for all kids. It's not in a board, I'm going to come and tell you what I don't like. And so how can we provide those opportunities for people to have that? You're still going to have people come to the board meetings publicly commenting, but in the back scenes, you can have people committed to the work and seeing it come along, because it's got to evolve and it's a process. And so it feels scary and disappointing. I'm right with you on that. But if we step back from that and we have the hope that we can enter into that dialogue and see people as people, I think that'll help us get past those less positive interactions into more positive ones face to face. I can only be hopeful. I could be wrong and completely naive.
See, the
I
thing,
mean that.
Sure. I'd like to speak because I unfortunately have to run already because I have a babysitter on for an hour. Correct. So I would like to say, Joel, that I came to the meeting. My son has been sick, so I haven't been here. He had cancer and he's doing great. But I specifically came out because I knew Joel would be the only Black person there.
No, I was there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Joel was not the only Black man,
Black,
but I was.
I don't know how you identify someone.
I'm Black.
You are, okay.
Yes,
My
Black,
apologies.
100% Black.
Okay, then my apologies then.
No
The
worries.
two people, and I wasn't sure who was gonna be there with Joel, so I really made a point to come. And Joel, I hear you. I was very disappointed at how the whole thing prior to is handled. I think that we don't have enough conversations when somebody says, stands up there and publicly announces that racism does not exist in Waunakee. And then goes on to give an example of how she experienced racism as a white person. I just was like, how is that not like addressed? This is why we have these issues. Like, do we need to yell at her? No, I might want to ask her, hey, we have this committee, I would like to share your experience. Tell me about it. Like, I agree. I just don't, I think the root of the problem is I feel that it's easy for people who are not of color to perhaps just be like, okay, yeah, we're having these conversations. We're going somewhere, that's great. But you guys get to turn it off. We never get to turn it off, and that's the problem. This can't come soon enough. It's long gone. We've got kids that have to deal with this, And so I think that's the problem, is that for me, I get really anxious and angry because it's always a soft conversation without results that I want to see, because I am this many years old in the United States and I have kids, and here we are still. And we're not allowed to ask those questions out loud. We're not allowed to, and it makes me really frustrated. And so Joel, I thought it, and you guys are so great to talk, especially after that hate-filled, I really felt a lot of hate. That was not a conversation of, hey, I don't know what DEI is, or I'm really sure. It was literally like, DEI should not exist. Literally, that was what, like people said that. Feel free to watch it. It was very hate-filled, and I was, unlike Joel though, I wasn't surprised because I've had some really bad experiences in Waunakee, so I was not surprised, but I was disappointed at how the board handled it. I was disappointed at not hearing them moderate, and we had all this jeering when somebody else came up, and these people were acting very immature. But at the same time, I didn't say anything because I know they were looking for a fight, so it would have done me no good to fight them. But I think that the board should have done some things, set a precedent that was inappropriate behavior. Those types of things are not okay. And I struggle with that. I struggle with that in my current job, in my current role at school. And I just wanted to say I'm clearly angry and very upset about this. And I think it's very important work that we're doing. It made me realize that my commitment to DEI is much stronger now because of how much work that we still have to do. I did tell Joel that part of me wants to hide under the table, like ignore it. It doesn't really do any good to do that. So keep showing up because I appreciate that you keep showing up. But I just want to let you know why perhaps I myself may sound like just an angry Asian lady all the time. It's because I can't turn any of this off ever. And I recognize that as an Asian person, I have more privilege than perhaps a Black man does, because nobody's going to fear me. Perhaps we might fear Joel, Okay, I'll get off my soapbox, but that's my 2 cents. It was a bad, I was.
That's just crazy to me, because it's just, me and my friends always talk about, because like, again, we're like 18-year-olds, just got out of high school. It's just like, we act more mature than adults people. Like I had more courageous conversations in high school where that had never broke out. Like, yeah, there was like a little like incidents where like, we'd be like, bro, like we're on 2 different sides, but like, it never got to the point where like, yeah, there's hatred in the school, but it's like, just crazy to me how like immature adults can act. Like, it just amazes me. Like, you're on the whole school board and you're acting like that in front of people. Your children are watching you. You wonder why I hated going to school because I'm Black, I'm getting bullied because of what you're teaching your kids. Like, it just is amazing.
So the one thing I will recommend, Tim, is that there needs to be set clear rules for engagement. Just set clear rules for engagement. I also suggest them to be written down, not only communicated on Monday, but also written down, because it is so important to communicate to the community the importance of civility. It truly is. It truly is. And I think that that's exactly where it starts. I do agree that the board did not handle that properly. I do agree with that. But nonetheless, I think it was a lesson learned, and how can we improve moving forward at this point?
I mean, we have to continue our work regardless. A couple things I was thinking. So, like, for instance, it was used that I was triggered, even though we got all these other people angry and everything else. I'm assuming they're just expressing themselves, but I'm always the trigger, or I'm not going to use the other phrase because that phrase was not used on me. But it's like that stuff is just normal. So my thing is that I'm doing this work because I care. Everything is coming from my heart, right? So, but I also understand that if we don't do this, who's going to do this? And then we have kids that are impacted. And I always bring it back to, even if you hate us adults, But if you really care about kids and that you truly care about kids, then you should be thinking about things differently or trying to think. But unfortunately, we know the reality too, a lot of this stuff trickles down. We're not surprised why in schools there's certain things that happen because it comes from home. But I feel though that this is not going to be the only time this is going to happen. I feel like we just have to navigate this well. It's going to look different and it probably is going to look scary. This is not going to be the last time it's going to look scary. But I do have to say again, that I was very surprised, and I'm not saying this represents our community, but I was very surprised what I saw in that room that night. But I also feel like maybe we have security or something when we have a big group like that. We live in a society right now that we have no clue what somebody's gonna do. That doesn't mean everybody's gonna do something, but we have no clue who's just gonna go off the handle and just, I don't know. And I feel like you don't want to wait till that happens, be more proactive and figure it out. So my suggestion would be that there should be some sort, I don't know, Waunakee police, somebody,
The chief of police would be a beautiful model.
but even if he wasn't moderating, even if we just had someone there with their presence, it really brings things down. That's all I'm just trying to say. It brings it down. Because again, if Randy's gonna moderate, that's fine, but I just feel like I'm thinking about safety. What happened if people decide to bring their kids to this event, which I know some people are bringing their kids to this event. And then all of a sudden these kids start seeing this craziness that's going on. Like, we have to think about that. So. Did you have your hand up?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I have so many thoughts. I watched the whole thing from the very beginning to the very end, and I think all of us need to. But first, Joel, you guys, thank you so much. The one, I think about some of the work that I've done, and I'm not very vocal in this group. I don't live in the community, but I work a lot with kids. Obviously, I'm a social worker who represent different groups or whatever. But one of the things when I first started working and started the Sonia Doris group, when the students would tell me different things, they would say, at least now it's out in the open. And people realize that so much hurt is happening to different students. I just remember thinking that, and as I was watching this unfold and feeling horrible, I thought, well, at least people are aware that, the environment is really, really not okay. And then I thought a little bit about the actions of the school board, and I need to do my work too and write to a variety of numbers. And I just feel like there has to be also some appreciation to this group. I'm not trying to say that like we're amazing and wonderful, but like we're giving up time with our kids and our families. And I have 2 young kids at home and I don't even live here, but I feel so strongly about this work. And I feel so lucky that this is happening. And I feel like I'm hanging on like we all are right now. But I think, Joel, what you said is that we have to keep going, and this just proves that the work needs to be done. And I had people come out of the woodwork to talk to me about it, and I've directed most of them to you, Joel. So I know there's so many people that care in the community and want what's best for all of our kids and to be safe. So it was terrible, and I feel awful for the situation, but I also think we have to hold our school board accountable and our leaders and administrators. And it's a complicated situation, but maybe it's not, it really can't get that way again. It was just not safe. Thank you both for presenting, and to our team, and to continue to work. And I know our students appreciate, a lot of the high school students know things are happening. And Monique and I, when we meet with Sonia Doris, we talk a lot about work that's happening and with the different groups through MSAN, and these are all high school level things, but the students appreciate it.
A quick question just about the Monday's meeting is, are we attending, or is it, and when we attend, if we're part of DEI, do we have to say like we're part, like, I guess that's where I'm not sure if I'm.
That's a great
I
question.
don't
So
understand,
it's a public, I think speaking just for myself, not in the official capacity, I think it would be fabulous if every member of the committee were able to work it into their schedule to attend. That having been said, if your commitments don't allow you to attend, it will be live streamed. But I think it'd be great to have every member of the committee. Now, the presentation, so the goal is 6:30 to an 8 o'clock hard stop. This thing is, I think, going to be hopefully a very good information piece, a very good dialogue, but the thinking is it should end at 8. And the initial piece that Randy has, I think his target is 15 to 20 minutes probably. There's information, well, first of all, there will be ground rules for the evening, but I'll take back the concept. I'm not sure if there was a plan to maybe circulate ground rules in advance. But
Yeah, some level of communication, I think, is so important.
so there'll be
It's
some
just
info
good.
stuff. There will be some of the drivers behind the work that's going on in this area. There'll be information on our partnerships. There'll be some information on our demographics. There will be the student lens that informs a lot of this work. And there will be kind of a background on the committee, how the committee was formed by the board. You know, you can't, Randy's not going to pretend to do justice to, you know, what was a full agenda item back on Monday night, but there will be a slide that will note a few of the recommendations, and we are going to have the whole thing there for people when they, participants, pick up and to read. And then it's going to open itself up for the public comments, both live and submitted online. And I would say, when I looked this morning, we might have been at around 10 submissions already, and it's Tuesday. So, you know, we'll see what happens by the end. But, and so that's kind of the format for the evening. It's not intended to be a debate. I mean, we'll have 2 mic lines, but the intention is not to have a pro mic line and an anti mic line. It's really just to kind of, you know, move people to the comment piece.
My thought with that was that, you know, I know that if I speak, I always have to be really clear because of my position with DEI, that it's like for myself and the community, but then I was like thinking there that it would obviously surface that if I said something that they'd be like, oh, but she's part of the DEI, you know, group, if somebody was having some sort of negative thing. So I didn't know if it was okay to say, hey, I'm also part of this committee. I wasn't sure what the rules were, and just really genuinely asking.
So I mean, as at any meeting of the Board of Education, you will need to state your name. My advice would be, state your numbers on the committee. The committee's doing good work. You were chosen to be on this committee. There is a trust placed in each of you to serve on the committee. You know, so I think you know, you should feel, I mean, I hope everybody would feel comfortable identifying themselves as a member of the committee. That having been said, you're under no requirement.
Oh, no,
to
I'm
identify yourself.
comfortable. I just want to make sure, because I'm not, clearly I don't do any type of board meetings. So I just want to make sure that what I do say is within bounds. That's why I'm genuinely asking.
But to add to that, you're a parent, right?
Yeah, and I
So
live in
my-
Waunakee and I pay taxes and all
No,
that
no,
stuff.
but regardless of
Yeah.
the taxes and stuff, what I'm saying is that if I come to you as a community member and a parent, you don't have to worry about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? Especially when we're talking about DEI. Now, I'm not saying like what Tim was saying, yes, you could say, I'm a member of this. But I think as we're coming forth, I know for me, I'm a parent with 4 kids, right? One's in college, but 3 her. So I think that's also important to not forget, even if you're not a parent, or how you relate, how that relates. You know, honestly, I hope people, because I've been hearing a lot of stories from people that I know that's not race-based, that is disability-based. I hope they tell their story, because the impact that it has. And those, to me, is what hopefully will start changing minds.
Thank you. I have to go and I really appreciate this team. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are all our meetings gonna be just in person from now on?
So that-
Are all of our meetings gonna be in person from now on?
I'm assuming, right?
And you
We
can't
we
join
have an
on,
option of coming,
Michelle is
of
on.
virtual.
There is a virtual?
yes.
Yeah.
That's my own fault then. Then I can really participate. I thought it was in person. only.
No. It's an option.
Take care.
Sorry.
I was confused.
Oh, there-
Nothing to be sorry about.
And I think, I would just add one thing, that if there are specific questions about the recommendations, I think it would be helpful for you to say, you know, because, again, I had a conversation already about this, and my question was about, is it just like public comment? Or is there going to be some back and forth as there was at the library event? And Randy said that his intention was that there would be some back and forth, and that he does not want to specifically be the person responding to other people. And so I would, and this message is from me, not from him, but I would encourage people to, especially in the event of a question about a recommendation or about the work of the committee, to feel free to speak up, because as participants, we are most familiar with what we've been doing. So
So Tim, to go on that, I think that there's gonna be a lot more speaking and interaction than Randy talking about what's actually happening. And I think that that's the point that I kind of keep going back to, is like, you're putting him in a very awkward situation. And I don't know what the answer to it is. I'm not a big group moderator person, but he's gonna be having to appease a wide variety of people, and he's our superintendent. And I think that puts him in a very awkward situation. And I think that that's something that needs to be thought out by Randy, by the Board of Education, by his administrative staff, of what that's gonna come off looking like, because there will be people angry when they leave that meeting, that either they didn't feel heard, or they didn't speak enough, or an answer wasn't given the way they want. That's why I'm kind of pushing to have like somebody else, that the daggers don't all go on to
And the
Randy.
board decided
And
at the
the
meeting,
board.
they specifically discussed having a third-party moderator, and they ended up deciding that it would be Randy, so,
Well,
I mean.
That's not what we decided.
I just.
But
have-
I brought up specifically that I thought it should be a third party, because Randy is supposed to be leading the administrative team
And be.
and leading part of this initiative.
And being a.
And for him to be the moderator, the people in the group that are gonna be upset with DEI, and I guarantee there will be people there, they've been emailing us for months, telling us to disband this committee immediately. They're gonna be there, and they're gonna keep saying the same things, and it doesn't matter what answer they're given, they're gonna keep saying the same thing. We know that's gonna happen. There is that percentage of the community. And for Randy to be up there trying to be moderator, it's gonna taint the process, and they're gonna claim it tainted the process.
Yeah. it
But
is.
in the meeting, did you
But-
not decide?
But at the
Not
meeting, they
to
did
have-
not decide.
Right.
I brought up saying, I really think you should find a third person so that you can stand up and advocate for the school district.
I think,
And I think as moderator, he basically handcuffed himself.
Yeah, he's gonna
Now-
be targeted, and it's not, gonna-
Right.
it's just not the direction he wants.
But,
to put
but
himself
it
in.
is where we're going. It's probably too late to do anything about it. You've only got 3 days.
There'll be.
Basically.
And I mean, I certainly appreciate the perspectives here, and these pros and cons will weigh. When you bring in a third-party moderator, though, you also sacrifice a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
you
you
are
do.
gaining the third-party moderation, but then you're depending on, in part, the skill of the moderator, who may or may not know your organization well. To then, it's one thing to moderate input, but then if you're also going to have a situation where you may have questions and you're trying to get the answer going from the right person in the room to answer it. In my experience, third-party moderators sometimes that's a trade-off with a third-party moderator. They may not fully understand the expertise in the room. You gain the fact that they can be that impartial traffic cop. So there's trade-offs, and I think depending on the heat or lack of heat that there is that night, that will tell the tale on, you know.
So what I would suggest, because it sounds like it's already coordinated and planned accordingly. So what I would suggest when it comes to questions related to the committee, I would suggest perhaps about 2 of us be the voice. Because if we just start relying on each other to stand up and to speak, we don't know sort of where the voices are truly coming from. But I think if we have, so Joel, you being the chair or co-chair, is there another co-chair?
No, that
Okay, so you being the chair, and perhaps maybe someone who authored the documents, some of the writer, the author, who could weigh in on that, just to have some semblance of coordination on our end. Now, and of course, the rest of us, if we decide to stand up and make comments and endorse and talk about the work that we do, I think that'd be great. But I suggest having a couple of us just targeted to just answer some of these questions. When they
And
come up
from an
with
event
this.
management standpoint, that would be helpful, so
Mhm.
that when a question comes
Yep.
in, Randy knows where to look.
Exactly, right,
To handle it, rather than kind of opening up the
exactly,
floor.
right.
So
exactly.
if there's a thought on that,
Mhm.
you know, Rebecca and I can bring that back to Randy, and that, I think that would help.
Yeah.
Streamline the flow of the evening.
Yeah, I think having someone who authored the document and having you definitely speak on behalf of the committee is really key and important.
But I think what's important is we have to show unity in this whole thing, in this whole process, right? Because I do agree with you. But I also feel though that, you know, we all need to step up and voice something, say something, even if it's scary, try to say something. Because then it shows that it's not just us two talking about this, representing everybody else. And I don't mind that because like I said, I probably know I'm gonna be the voice, you know, but I want us to just weather the storm and continue to move forward, but we all need to move forward.
And that's fine now, right, that's fine, and we are unified, I don't see us not being unified, I get the, yeah, I get the
Speaking
impression.
wise though, not just in the
Yes,
room.
Can I offer a perspective? I'll jump after you, because I didn't want to interrupt.
no, and I'm almost done, no. I think also, not everyone is comfortable in this space to speak, not everyone's comfortable. So I think that's why it's important to identify the speakers. I think it would be great if other members can speak up, but I think that may be an expectation that we probably don't want to set on every member here. That we don't want to set on every member. That's just my thoughts. Yes, Laura.
Yeah, so the idea of coming into the meeting, we're feeling the emotion of the event. We're anticipating that it is going to be hot or heated. And when we come in, how we present the idea of DEI, we can't control how people take things in. We're not ever going to be able to. So in that positive intent way, what is it that I can carry into a space and share with a group of people, so that we're not going in and, you know, it's not polarizing, we must do this. It's, we've done this great work in a unified way. The only message that we need to have as a team is we did a very systematic process to look at what we have in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion in our district. We created a report of recommendations based on our data, and we presented it to the board. We believe in our equity work, and we stand by this work, and we hope that it evolves over time. It's in the hands of our school and our community to see this through. And if we come in a defensive tone, because we feel like we have to be the cheerleaders of it, it's polarizing. And if we come into it where we feel like we have to defend every question that comes after every recommendation, we're gonna be backed into a corner. So it really is one united message of this is the work we've done without taking defense, but just saying, hey, this is where we're working together. We don't have all the answers, but this is the first step of where we are.
Great point. To
Just
have
an
that
idea.
Consistent message.
Just an idea.
Exactly. Great point. Excellent.
And well, I would agree. Like if someone doesn't feel like not being defensive, then
I totally
do
agree.
you? I mean,
I'm not naming that.
so I just want to make
Yep.
sure that everybody knows that they can say.
Can I say that,
Yeah.
so, and I think that has to do with lenses. If we're talking about the lens of the DEI work as a community, that's one thing. If I step in as a teacher that's passionate about my role of equity, or I'm a parent and I'm coming in, I'm speaking from that lens, we can speak whatever we want. But in terms of the DEI work and feeling like we need to all be able to speak up, we can do whatever we want, but just however the defensive way puts us on a spot of having to defend what we're doing when all we're doing is putting out information. So I'm just trying to avoid getting into that spot in whatever manner.
I mean, we don't really have to rehash like what we did, because we did that already on Monday,
Yeah.
right? So this conversation might cross it, but we shouldn't retell
Correct.
everything that we did on Monday.
Correct.
That doesn't make any sense.
Correct.
Because I think at this point, the board just wants to hear what the community has to say. about
Yes.
it, Right? So I do agree with you in terms of being defensive, but I think what's gonna happen is just, it's the questions, right? So someone's gonna say a question and someone may need to, I don't say need to, but may need to answer a question because they're thinking the wrong way. And then
I mean,
that-
frankly, people who are paying
Okay.
attention have the recommendations, and I assure you, will be coming and saying in point 7B,
oh, yeah.
what do you mean by this? So
I hear you.
Someone already quoted me already. I'm just trying to say, it's just, so I think so I think we just have to, I do feel like it's a consistent messaging and when I say about unity, I just feel like, for me, it's just different because, yeah, you could be the voice, you could do that, but at the same time, it gets exhausting. I'm sorry, I mean, other people can, go through that storm many, many times and get back up. But, and I know that's just the role that's gonna be there. It just gets exhausting, that's all.
And you know what, Joel, you can defer to me whenever you feel like
Thank
it. You can defer to me. I am happy
Thank you.
and
And
very comfortable
my thing is that
representing the
we're
group.
not the only people of color in this community. That's what I'm trying to say. You look at board meetings, I mean, it's the same thing. Nobody shows up and it just gets frustrating. That's all. It just gets
How
frustrating.
can we support that? So like, when I hear that, it makes me feel awful. And then how do I, as an ally, because I can't share that experience, I can be a voice. And I can, like, I'll take on the stage as well. But how do we lift some of that burden off of people that are tired of constantly defending?
It's to me, and again, I think it's just different. To me, it's showing up, right? If you support DEI in this community, Monday, show up at that meeting. To me, that's what it is. And to me, that speaks. Because what ends up happening is if you don't show up, you know who's gonna show up. And they're gonna be in there with numbers. And the voice that's gonna be heard is that voice. And
I think the board meeting was another perfect example. As many of you know, I went to a real fun meeting at a golf course. And
You were
got to
reminded of
hear,
that Monday night.
I got to hear their training session. And the fact that someone said the definition of the word equity is critical race theory.
Yes.
And I'm just sitting there going, what dictionary are you reading from? And they don't even provide it. They don't care. That was the definition. And the speaker said it directly. Every time you hear the word equity, they are talking critical race theory. Every time your school board says equity, that's critical race theory. Every time they create a committee with the word equity in it, that's critical race theory. And you're just sitting there going, what are you talking about? And this guy's from Ohio. And he comes to Wisconsin to tell parents in Waunakee what's happening in their school board. And it's just like, nobody questioned him. There wasn't a single person in the room who thought, hold it, what did that mean here in Waunakee? Nobody asked that question. That was never brought up. And the fact that that was a lot of what they were saying. And it was 4 speakers in a row basically doing the same thing. And none of them were even from Wisconsin. And that's what they did. And these parents that you saw on Monday night, half the words they said were repeated from exactly what was said there. And we've been on the board, we've been getting those emails for months, just constantly saying, get rid of that. Until last week. That's when we started getting emails from the other way saying support DEI. And there were a couple of them, not many. But it's just exactly like the mask thing was over a year ago. All you got was emails attacking having a mask requirement and how we were abusing children. This year, you started getting emails saying, please put the mask policy in place. And I as you're saying, people have to show up. I think the vast majority of this community supports a DEI initiative when just hearing about it. They say, yeah, it's a good idea. You should do that. Every
Right.
kid should feel included.
That's right.
There's a minority that says, how dare you bring up inclusion?
Exactly. Small
But
group.
they have been showing up hard and fast for months. And as Joe said, we need to start showing up, or they control the message, they control the thing. That becomes the news article, that becomes everything else.
So can I ask a question about Monday? So I kind of heard this referred to as like a question and answer thing, but really, we can tell people, you can just come and say, I'm proud to be in a school district where we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee.
Mhm.
I think this is great. Keep it up. Like, people can just make a comment like that, right?
Mhm.
And
So
just
this is,
make their voice
that's
heard.
a great question, Bethany. So this is our first meeting of this type for the year. And diversity and inclusion is in a full position because
Access to opportunity.
there's an access to, because there's no question, this is probably the most salient public topic right now, outside maybe the pandemic, you know. But we've had these types of meetings before, and it's really designed to connect the board with the community, to hear questions, to provide participants with information about what is already happening around that topic in the school district. It's an opportunity for people that have an endorsement or a perspective to share it. I mean, we've done these before with co-curriculars. We've done this with substance abuse and other AODA programs. The one following this is going to be focused more on student achievement. You know, so it's absolutely fine for people to share their perspectives. I mean, it's designed to be civic engagement, and civic engagement should also be civil engagement. And that's, you know, the tenor that we hope to see Monday night. It's been the tenor that's always characterized other linkage sessions in the past. Now, I would add, you know, that, you know, there will probably be some questions and comments around the work of the committee. You know, Dave, as a board member, you have received lots of public questions and comments.
I get pictures.
Well, you get pictures too, but, you know, some of those related directly to the work of the committee. Others of those are in this space, not directly to the work of the committee. Not everything that's going to be said or asked Monday night is going to be about the committee. Some of it will. Crystal ball, I can't tell you the ratio, you know, but, you know, I think the idea of having some go-to people, if there's a question about the work of the committee or the recommendation, to know who's going to try to be participating in the answer to that, I think that's an outstanding idea. So what I'm hearing is, you know, Joel,
I'm back up. Yeah.
you know,
Count me in.
And
Leslie.
Joel, you can like defer to me too, and I'll
Okay,
just make
thank
sure
you.
that I kind of feel
Yeah.
prepared.
Okay.
And if there's a question, you know, we'll sit together. If you're like, Leslie, can you take this? I'll do
Yeah.
it. I'll do it.
Well, I think it's even the work that was put with the equity tool, right? There's a lot of stuff that you guys know that I don't, right? The process. I mean, yes, we talked.
Yeah, I might not be able to
I wouldn't be able
answer
to answer.
question number 2 big, so. I mean,
Yes.
I may not be able to answer that question. But that's why I said we need to have someone who has authored that document. I've read it.
I didn't offer it, but
If I get to 2 billion, I'm like, oh my gosh.
So in addition to seeing if we're gonna circulate kind of the ground rules in advance, we will see if phone a friend is an option, during the meeting. But I mean, there are ways to, I mean, and again, the entire administrative team will be there. Now, some will be working on the flow of the audience, Randy is moderating. He doesn't, I'm sure Randy will take some responses. I don't think Randy anticipates he'll be taking all of the responses. Where there's a qualified resource, he's going to want to have that individual brought into the mix. So if it's the work of the committee, I think we've just had some discussion of that. If it's about our special education programs, he's going to probably look to Tiffany Logan. If it's about our English language learner programs, he's going to look to Chris Mann. Elementary, Amy Johnson. Secondary, and some other topics, he'll probably be looking to me. It's really going to depend on kind of what comes up at the top.
I can almost guarantee one topic that will come up is a lack of need for this. Someone's going to bring that up, that there is no need for this type of work really being done. And part of that I blame myself for, because 4 years ago, there were so many direct incidents that happened in the high school, the middle school, and the intermediate school. And everything was handled behind the scenes. And by doing that, nobody saw that we had the same thing going on that you just read about in Baraboo today. It was happening here. It's happened here. It's your son gave incredible statement at that public meeting. And it would be great if some students were there to say that this really does happen. Don't pretend it doesn't. I mean, I like how the paper directly said that people were using the N-word in school to students directly, that kids were wearing Confederate clothing directly in front of other kids, and that they were confronting them. And not all has happened in Waunakee. And I think we've done a great disservice by, I understand the need for protecting the names of individuals, but to protect the name of the individual, to also make it look like nothing ever happened, is a great disservice to the whole rest of the community and to the rest of the students, and doesn't help the next student. All it did was make it act like, it allows someone to get up in front of the school board and say, there is no racism in Waunakee. Why? Because nothing's ever happened. And all we have is one YouTube video of kids who video themselves. And we can't show them everything that's happened. And at some point, we have to be able to say it does happen, because there's going to be a denial of it. And I think that's one thing that this committee hasn't gone towards yet. We've been doing the audit, but I think at some point you have to go into inclusion is about allowing kids to feel safe in school. And we don't really go down that road yet. And that's something I'm hoping, probably the biggest reason to keep DEI going is to start going down that road.
Well, I think also to your point, we have to be transparent with what's happening. So, and that's why you have a parent come to the table, say that there's no racism, because we haven't been transparent with situations that have occurred.
Yeah, we'll
And
sit
that
there
is
and
so
tell you that
important.
the power went out at the high school today within an hour, but we won't tell you if
Right in the
a
middle of
group of
Minecraft,
students
probably.
have messed with another group of students.
I do think, I mean, certainly that question about if racism exists was something that caused pause, right? I think in the context of, again, the overarching race and everything else, I trust that in this presentation made by Randy, there will be a strong case made for the diversification that has taken place in the last 10 to 15 years in Waunakee, the data that we looked at that shows that there are not, what's the word I'm looking for? There's disproportionality, thank you,
Disproportionality,
sorry, I had a dig. And so I think all of those, sleeping like reasons why will be there, but as Joel said, a story, frankly, I will tell you, is specifically what Randy requested without maybe knowing that he requested that, because I don't remember even where we were last year, but I think it was a staff situation where Randy talked about how parents called him and told their story about how the pandemic was affecting them. And he was clearly moved by these stories. And I frankly have taken lots of communications training, some specific to this topic. And stories are powerful. Stories hit home. We connect with stories. And so I think when Joel brought that up, that's super important.
And
That
we haven't.
we're
done
gonna
that
have
yet.
the overarching picture from Randy, and then it will be up to individuals in the community to share their story.
But again, that puts the lift on people to have to share their stories.
Yeah.
And then, and
I
I'm
mean,
not,
you can speak for your students, right? I mean, students at the elementary level can't speak for themselves necessarily.
can we tell, so that's,
Without name, I mean,
Yeah.
there will be anonymity for sure. But I can say that in my career in the last 15 years, I have experienced.
Yep.
This, right?
But isn't that's the transparency we're talking about, right? So I think the thing is, you're not giving names out.
I
but You're
know.
saying that everything is not hunky-dory, that these things do happen. So if someone does say DEI is not necessary, then that's one example why DEI is not necessary, because everyone's gonna keep challenging you.
Sure.
Well, how do you know? So how do you know what somebody needs? You know, well, someone has to identify it first to see that they're lacking something.
I guess my pause is when we've been in some of the equity trainings, we've been is you don't share somebody else's story without their permission. That's, I think, where my pause is, but I hear completely what you're saying too. I'm not discounting it at all. That's just my brain.
I have to go. Thank you
All right,
guys.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justine.
All right, so I know we're past our time. I really do. Well, let me just kind of go through. We basically covered everything. So discussion or consider the attendance and response to DEI committee at and during the 9/27/21 community engagement meeting. We already spoke about that. Updates on board actions and decisions that would be informational from the committee.
See you in November. I think that was the answer. You know, they're gonna defer, they're obviously deferring to do anything until November, which will be time for the September meeting to be over. There was talk that they wouldn't have, two of the board members wouldn't be around in October, or at least one. So they decided the best time to one,
So for now,
get
we
stuff ready.
schedule meetings and continue our work until we
Yeah.
hear otherwise.
I mean, I think you should maybe talk with Joan
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Personally, there was some discussion as to whether the DEI was supposed to suspend until after the decision by the board, or whether really no decision was made, therefore
18 months is not up.
I thought they rushed to try to get this answer in by September. And I'm sitting there going,
Yeah.
shouldn't it be when they're done is when they should report rather than an artificial thing? But we are where we're at. But I mean, if you schedule a meeting.
Oh, no, I mean, I plan to, I don't plan to stop scheduling unless they, say without a committee anymore. My plan is to just continue.
If anything, the biggest thing to do is start to address the fact that we have lost members. We do need more student members. We do need to fill some holes. If nothing else, we should start working on that.
Because, well, the thing I was kind of directed not to do any of that, and to kind of figure out what's gonna happen. So, but you know what, even
So
if,
will there be a report to us telling us what should happen one way or the other?
That's what they're supposed to decide.
They're supposed to give a report or just let us know? The board, do you know? You sit on the board, correct?
I don't think there was any.
I don't think there was a firm consensus on that at that point. The only thing they really decided is we're gonna have this engagement meeting, and then we're gonna talk and make a decision in November. And that was it.
And I think part of the reason, and Dave, you've been party to the discussions, I haven't been, I think, but there's a good chance the board will have a full complement in November meeting that they probably won't have for the October meeting, and given the importance of the topic, I think there's a desire. I don't see this as a desire to slow walk it. I see it as one more month gets us to our full complement for a really important conversation, and they'd like to take that extra month and have a good shot at getting it set.
I mean, we can never go away. That's all I'm saying. So. All right, so, can I have a voice? Sure. Yeah, just meetings, future meetings. So I think what I'll do, okay, I'm sorry. And then the other thing, discussion of recommendations to the district for the equity for other issues, including building accessibility, audits of accessibility websites, discussion of district progress on the removal of Native American imagery, a discussion of district hiring practices, ensuring a diverse workforce, and discussion of district curriculum on the teaching of issues involving race and ethnicity. All right, so what I was planning, we'll do another meeting. We'll just kind of put out a poll just to kind of see what works for everyone. We'll go that way, if that works for everyone. I would suggest eat before you go on Monday. So.
Oh, it was at the high school?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it'll be in the high school performing arts
PAC.
center.
What time is it now?
6:30 start.
6:30.
And a hard stop at 8, right?
Yeah.
I heard hard
Yeah,
stop.
right.
Yeah, let's make that hard stop.
So, in terms of next time's agenda, we'll include the things we didn't get to and returning to the glossary, or are there other things? I just want to make sure that I'm prepared. if there are.
Yeah, I think what we can do is, don't forget, people can add to the agenda. You just have to let record know like we're doing it. So that's fine. But I'm just gonna add the stuff that we had before and just add it to it. So, and if you think I'm missing something, we can do that. But you know, if you really think about it, we just have to, we're kind of on a lull right now until we kind of know what's going on. So let's just kind of.
I think for the next agenda, if I could just recommend for us a debrief Mondays.
Oh, yes.
meeting.
Say that again?
Debrief
Oh, that's a
on
good idea.
Monday session. Just what was the takeaways? What was the
Could I-
takeaways that were?
Could I also ask for a follow-up, because I read this on, the Waunakee Can We Talk website or Facebook page, and there was a big talk that we did not meet one of our very first charges, which was about disability. And as I recall, when we talked about that topic, we were told as a committee that there was actually another district committee that was going to be doing a walkthrough and different things. Could we maybe revisit that so that we understand that we did not let that go, that we were told that this was.
It would be looked at as part of the next
Yes,
round. of
and so we
discussion.
kind of pushed it aside, but there is some community outrage that we have, not followed charge 1D of our Disabilities Act, but that was just taken off because we were told that something else was going to happen. So I just think we need to be clear to the community that we have not ignored and refused to act upon any charges.
Yeah, and, and I know we're getting on time. I don't know if we've actually, shared this in space. So architects were in the district this week to do kind of pick up
Right.
where we had been pre-pandemic with our facilities discussion. I'd also add, and I think people have assumed this, but I don't know we've actually shared it in the space. I mean, after a recommendation, there's a process regarding the painting in the old gymnasium. It went to goals committee. We had our 2 Native American staff members of the district work with the goals committee with representatives from the Ho-Chunk Nation. Following that, the board directed administration to remove the painting. The painting's been removed for several weeks now.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think we've shared that. yet. So
No.
that
The
was
last
a,
meeting.
that was a recommendation
I
that
wasn't
came
here.
from this committee. And if you were to go to the old, in fact, come a little early, Monday night and look in the
Yeah.
gym and you will see that it's, I mean, Monique, you work in the high
There's
school.
kind of a scar on the wall.
Well, it's
So I'm
because it was
hoping
there,
that
the
something
paint
new
is
will
actually
take its
lighter than the
place, yeah.
painting,
Understood,
so
yeah.
but you can see where it was.
And I think there's discussion somewhere about what might happen next,
Say what's
but
gonna happen.
that's part of a greater
I think the
discussion
original
than
artists are
us.
gonna get the first right of access to what they create.
Well, I heard somebody was gonna put it on the garage. Who overlooks the school. Like you just, hopefully something good gets
It should
done
be treated
within,
with
you know,
respect.
I would say,
I would hope so.
absolutely.
I mean, I think, the only thing I think is, I mean, I don't think the board has made a final decision on ultimate outcome. I think the conversation was the original artist would have the first chance to take ownership of, their work from the 70s. I don't think we've shared it here that, the recommendation from this committee was followed up on and complete.
So
That-
was-
that part
that's
of the
important.
recommendation.
Yeah,
There's
thank you
other
so much, Tim.
parts-
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's other parts that will be addressed as part of the district's rebranding process, but that particular image that was talked about, that has been.
That's DEI.
That's right.
Right? So that's important.
I don't think we've brought it back.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. All right, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you.
And you guys, don't get disheartened.
No,
There's gonna
no,
be
no.
people who are gonna say, no matter what, get rid of all this.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
And just realize it's a money.
I don't know if you heard that before.